right, so we're starting again. Mark,
Michael?
thanks for coming to the studio.
God, deja vu. Seems like I heard
Seems
that.
like I just said that a second ago. And I guess we could do a little introduction of. I mean, but people know who you are. They can look you up if they want to know who you are. They'll
Yeah,
look you
just
up.
look me up.
Anyway, you're but you and I've been have worked together for some time on
Very long time.
on the Oil and Gas Global Network, and which is still going strong. But this show about the American Dream, one of the things that keeps coming up, or it has come up a couple of times in different conversations, is this whole notion of how energy factors into our ability to continue to have this wonderful, thing that we have. So in some of the other episodes, we've talked about how what we have in America enables people to live a better, richer, fuller life compared to where they might have been or what they might have done. And we looked at that from different angles. But another component of it is like there's the underpinnings of what makes it possible. And it has come up from time to time that energy is like energy is a big deal. We started, one reason why we have the society that we have today is because of energy. So I don't know, maybe talk about that a little bit. How did energy come to make it possible for us to have such a better life?
Well, so let me just start by saying here in the U.S. and in Europe, most people are spoiled by the abundant, cheap, reliable energy that we have, right? We take it for granted. We don't always understand the science behind it, the economics behind it, but literally we're spoiled. I think of this every morning. So I love coffee, right? And I have an espresso machine.
Yeah.
How much energy do you think it takes for me to have an iced coffee from an espresso machine each morning? Think about it. Somebody had to grow those beans in another part of the world, right? That was the amount of energy. Somebody had to move those beans to the U.S. Somebody had to roast those beans. Somebody had to ship them, package them. I bought them. Think about all that energy right there.
Yeah.
Then I go to my house. I grind them up. There's energy right there. I take steam, convert that steam and the ground up coffee to espresso, and then because I like it iced, I didn't pour it over ice. Just that amount of energy, Michael, is more than most people had to use in their entire lifetime in 11 and 1200s. The amount of energy I spent making my espresso drink in the morning.
Yeah. Okay. So, right. So you compound that by all the things that we do. It came up actually. In a previous episode with somebody that you and I both know who was codenamed Ben Powers, and he was explaining that it was where he was kind of giving a little history lesson on how if you kind of look at how, and actually Mark Mills talks about this as well, our friend Mark Mills from the Manhattan Institute, but basically there was in the early 20th century when all of a sudden we were able to have the abundance of low costs, easy to produce, high density energy, what that did for like society's trajectory in terms of what like you look over hundreds of years and there's kind of like an incremental improvement in quality of life, and then all of a sudden it just goes
off the chart,
crazy.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. It's really interesting. So by having that amount of energy, and once again that's reliable and inexpensive, it frees up our time to do other things, right?
Right.
If you and I were still living in the hunter-gathering area, we would not be sitting here shooting video,
right?
Because we'd be too worried about feeding our family, not getting eaten by saber-toothed tigers, right? So that energy allows things to happen like music, art, history, right? All the stuff that's creative is only allowed because that energy allows us to survive and to flourish as a species. And if you look at over the history of time, it's only if you look at how long basically modern man has been here, let's say 60,000 years, right? And if you look at that over and compare that to a calendar year, it's literally the only last day or two in December that we've had this abundant energy. And the truth is our modern lifestyle actually didn't start to about 4 seconds before midnight on December 31st, right? So we haven't evolved to appreciate and to understand it, because we still look at everything as survival. You know, that energy has also allowed us to feed the world. You look at here in the U.S., we don't have a malnutrition problem. We have a hypernutrition problem.
Yeah.
We eat too much. We have too much nutrition. Why? Because it's cheap. Why is it cheap? Because we have the energy to produce food at scale.
Yeah, actually, I read an article recently, and God, I forget what it was. Or maybe it was, I don't know, but
the pictures
they were talking about it was talking about how, actually, no, I think I just heard somebody talking about this. Anyway, point is, comes from a very reputable source, that if you look at how much, even if you go back 100 years ago in the U.S., the 1920s, 30s, whatever, which is really crazy to me to think that when we talk about 100 years ago, it's the 1920s, because as a kid, that didn't seem that long ago.
All.
Yeah, but if you look at the amount of money that the average American household spent on food, just putting food on the table, the percentage of income was actually way higher than it is today. We actually spent a fraction, and I forget the numbers now exactly, but back then it was something like 20 or 30% or whatever of your income went toward food, and today, we complain about high prices at the grocery store, but the reality
much
is we're spending like 5 to 10% of our income on food. It's something like that. The numbers were. So that's I mean, some of that is because we learned how to do bad things to the food to make it grow faster and stuff like that.
Well, whether that's bad or not, it doesn't matter. It still goes back to energy. And, if you think about it, it's also disconnected us from a lot of stuff that allows us to be more creative. So you talked about food. Let's pick something. Let's pick a grilled cheese sandwich. Could you make a grilled cheese sandwich, Michael?
I can.
Do you know how to find where the wheat grows?
No.
Do you know how to competitively breed that wheat so you get the perfect wheat?
No.
Do you know how to plant the wheat?
Well, I can dig a hole in the ground and put the seeds in there.
So you can't even get the wheat to make the bread.
Right.
So the truth is, you rely on years and years of other people's learning to make the grilled cheese sandwich, right? It's a collaborative effort with your ancestors or other people's ancestors. But that collaborative effort is documented. Once again, that collaborative effort and that documentation would never exist without energy.
Without it, right. And energy, okay, so this is what I want to get to, is energy in a certain amount, well, this goes back to your first point, which is the amount of energy that you use just for your espresso is more than, whatever it was, somebody in the 1800s.
1100s, not 1800s, 1100s.
1100s, somebody in the 1100s. And so we're benefiting, I think we've made the case, that we are benefiting from a supply, an energy supply over the last 100 years that has been, the quantity and the cost and everything has been good about all that. Now,
I do need to stop you there.
Okay, go ahead.
That's here and in Europe. That's not the whole world.
It's not the whole world.
Unfortunately, there are areas of the world that don't have the prosperity that we receive from abundant energy.
All the more so, which kind of points back to the whole thing about this show being about life in America. It's one more piece of that thing that makes it better for us. So now we have this push. I want to talk about electrification. With that background of energy is really important, and if we fuck it up, then we're gonna have a problem.
We're screwed.
Right? Yeah. So energy, and not just having some energy, the quantity that we need, and the
reliability,
and
the price,
So electrification, we got this rush toward electrification, and the thing that it makes me think about is do we risk knocking out, if our energy supply is one of the things that's kind of a pillar of our ability to pursue the American dream, do we need to be a little more careful with it than we're being? So hey, Trev, can you pull up the you got the Mark Mills article? This is actually from a couple of years ago, but this is I think it's from a couple of years ago. Can you make it bigger?
I sort like squinting.
Can you make it bigger? All right, yeah. So our friend Mark Mills, who's been on the show before, back it out a little bit. I want to see the headline, and our viewers want to see it. So he wrote this article. 2019, and it's the new energy economy and exercise in magical thinking. Which, if you know Mark, that's kind of his snarky sense of humor.
Yeah.
But and he talks in here about this movement for decades to replace. Now, ironically, he does mention, he says, originally we wanted to replace hydrocarbons because we were afraid we were going to run out of them. And then we discovered that we got plenty of them.
Right.
And so now it's not about running out of them anymore, but it's because of all the damage that they're doing to the world. And Mark likes to harp on how wind, solar, and batteries just don't get it done. And so he gives a lot of wind. The favorite alternatives provide. Now this was in 2019, and wind, solar, and batteries were providing 2% of the world's energy. And 3% in the America of the United States. And then he goes on to say, you can't get there from here with these alternative sources that we have. And he explains about, and what he gets into is about, and Trev, if you scroll down, he gets into the physics. He's like, it's not about, it's just a matter of simple physics. These things don't have the energy density, and you can't produce them in the quantities. If you just look at simple physics, you can't get there.
Right.
So let's start with that. What's your take on that?
100%. So I'm old enough to remember the same conversations in the 70s. I mean, literally the same conversations. The only thing that was different is that hydrocarbons were supposedly putting particles in the air, which was reflecting sunlight, and we're headed toward our next ice age. And the world tried to move towards solar, geothermal, hydro, wind, not nuclear, which would have made sense. But Greenpeace did a really good job of convincing the world that nuclear was not the way to go, because they were obviously wrong. We're still fighting that public perception thing with the Greenpeace around nuclear. But Mark makes a great point about energy density. The other thing is you have to understand we talked about physics. You have to understand the science, Michael. So a hydrocarbon is energy. It is potential energy that was made by photosynthesis from animals and plants in our world's oceans and stored and condensed by Mother Earth, right? Solar and wind is a technology. It's not energy. It is a technology. And the problem with both of those is they're intermittent. Now, you can bridge that being intermittent with something like a battery, which is then storage. Interestingly enough, a battery, let's take a lithium-ion battery, is stored chemical energy that releases electricity. A hydrocarbon is stored chemical energy that you can generate electricity with, right?
Yeah, sure.
But a lithium-ion battery is expensive, right? Storage is very expensive on the renewable side. On the hydrocarbon side, storage is free.
It's built in, right?
It's in the ground.
It's already there.
Right? And so renewables have their place, especially in parts of the world that aren't spoiled by abundant energy like we are. I live in a 3,100 square foot house in Houston, Texas. I probably burn 10 kilowatts a day during the summer. My 2 air conditioners running, but I can afford that. You go someplace like Africa, they need just enough electricity to keep a refrigerator running, recharge your cell phone. That's only a couple of watts. And a solar and a battery is a great solution to that. But by our world's politicians trying to push us into the renewables too quick, we have energy shortages, which we've all experienced. The world's going through an energy shortage right now because of that.
Yeah.
Because of politics, not because of the lack of energy that you generate from hydrocarbons.
Yeah. So I want to back up on a couple things. The first question is, so there's 2 components to this, right? So if I'm thinking, if all of a sudden somebody gave me the job and said, your job from now on is to protect the American dream and make sure that we don't lose it. And if I'm looking at energy, the first thing I'm thinking is, okay, well, if you're moving toward these alternative sources, electrification is the big thing, right? The first thing is, can you even are you on a fool's errand? Can you get there from here? And then if you can get there from here, if you can't get there from here, then we need a new plan. If you can get there from here, then the next question is, but if you go too fast, and if you start knocking this leg of the stool out before you've built up the others, then then we have a problem, right? And then all of a sudden we have disruption. So
if you take nuclear out of the mix, we can't get there with renewables. We could get close, but we're gonna have to change our lifestyle. And you see a lot of people talking about leading a simpler lifestyle in order to be able to live 100% off renewables. I, for one, don't want to live a simpler lifestyle. I have a 525 horsepower car that I enjoy driving, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to drive a 90 horsepower car, right?
Yeah.
I have 2 freezers in my house so I can buy meat in bulk. I don't want to not have 2 freezers in my house, right?
Yeah.
And most people feel the same way. Most people want to save the planet, which is great. I do too. But the moment you start taking modern lifestyle away from them, they put the brakes on things. So if you put nuclear back in the mix, we can get there. But if you take nuclear out, we won't ever get there unless we diminish the amount of energy that we use as a country.
Substantially.
Well, maybe not substantially, but enough to change our lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Enough to change our lifestyle substantially.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It would be, yeah. All right. So if you take nuclear out of the mix,
and then nuclear only works if we go ahead and build nuclear plants, which we don't do.
Yeah. Okay. I want to. So you mentioned your car, and you know there's the big craze. Well, actually, hold on. Before we move on to the car thing. So if you can sit here very matter-of-factly and say, okay, without nuclear, we can't get there from here. And I've heard other people say the same thing. And, of course, we can cite studies and statistics and this, that, the other. Why is there so many people in the world today, and all not just the screaming activists that are, you know, doing crazy things, but people in corporate, people in industry, people in politics, people, you name it. Everybody's like throwing in with this, with the notion that all we got to do is just like build more wind farms, build more, what's the other thing? Solar. Build more solar panels. And turn off all these coal plants and just do all this shit that we just need to do it faster so that we can get there faster. So this is 2 different like views, right? So on the one hand, we got you can't get there from here. Over here, you got like lemmings to the sea. So why are so many people convinced that you can get there and all we have to do is just hurry up and get there?
There's a handful of reasons, in my opinion. Now, Michael, I'm still trying to figure this out. Quite simply, I had a podcast that failed because I couldn't get all the people that say they hate the oil and gas industry on the show to talk about it.
Oh yeah,
right?
That's true. Yeah.
So one thing is the anti-fossil fuel movement has done a wonderful job of marketing what they do. I will give them total street cred for that, right?
Yeah, it's almost like it's a given. Like people don't even question it anymore. Like people don't even sit around going, we're not even debating. Like we've skipped over the debate about whether it's necessary and if it's possible, and we've just gone right onto that this is what we're doing.
Yep. At the same time, the oil and gas industry, and I'll take ownership of this, has done a horrible job talking about the facts of what we do, talking about the benefits we bring to mankind, the fact that you can harvest hydrocarbons responsibly. How about this for your listeners? The fact that hydrocarbons are still being made. You don't hear that anymore, right? Not at the same rate at this Jurassic and Pleistocene area, but right now here in the Gulf of Mexico, hydrocarbons are still being made. The oil and gas industry has done a horrible job of educating the world. And then quite simply, there's a cultish element about it, and there always has been. You look at things like SARS, bird flu, killer bees, the hole in the ozone. As you went through time, you had all these global catastrophes, which, by the way, none of them ever happened.
Right.
But people bought into it, and there's a psychological reason for that. I don't know what it is. I'm not a psychologist, but there's a reason that people want to have a joint belief in something, whether it's based on science or not. And then what happens is you end up getting that crowd mentality. Like, well, everybody knows the Arctic will be ice-free by 2013, right? So everybody buys into that. Now, did the Arctic become ice-free in 2013? No, right? And actually, the Arctic ice is actually growing. People don't understand the science. So that's one of the reasons, is the fact that People don't understand the science. The anti-fossil fuel people have done an excellent job at marketing stuff. The oil and gas industry have done a horrible job at educating the public. And then you have this psychological component, which I can't figure out myself, that people want to believe in that.
Yeah, yeah. It's I don't get it.
Yeah, me neither.
And when things don't turn out the way that everybody predicts, nobody ever goes back and says, and like recalibrates.
There's that, and then there's also a component I've noticed lately that, once again, I can't quite figure out why, but there's an anti-human component of this. Like, there's something wrong with being a Homo sapiens. There's something wrong with mankind, and the only way we can make the world right is for mankind not to have any impact. We're a product of nature.
Yeah.
We're as natural. We follow the same rules of physics and chemistry as every other life form on this planet. There's a lot of things that other life forms do way better than we do. We just happen to collaborate really well, communicate really well, and build stuff really well. It doesn't mean that we're necessarily a dominant life form. You take all the animals, throw them out. Take just the insects, throw them out. Take just the beetles. There's more weight in beetles on this planet than there's been the weight of humans in all of history. So weight in beetles than all the weight in humans.
Beetles.
Yeah.
So if you put all the beetles on a big scale.
Yeah, and take all the people who've ever lived, ever, in 60,000 years, the beetles are heavier, right? So and there's something there, and I'm telling the renewable crowd out there right now, they're going to come after you too. You're seeing it right now on the east and west coast with the wind farms, and they're saying they're killing whales, and they're starting to halt and do surveys. I'm telling you right now, a whale knows where a wind farm is. A whale knows where ships are. Not that long ago in recent history, whales had to worry about something called megalodon, which is a great ride on steroids. They used to bite blue whales in half.
Yeah.
They have to worry about killer whales killing their babies. The sounds of a wind farm by no means disturb whales. And by the way, I'm a green wildlife manager, so I don't want to talk on this.
Yeah.
And yet you're starting to see the same people that pushed against oil and gas push against wind farms.
So they're just anti-human, is what you're saying.
They're anti-human, and I don't understand that part.
Well, so the Chat GPT episode's coming up in a couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about getting rid of humans. But yeah, so and that actually comes to something I wanted to. So let's come back to the cars. So because this is the big craze right now, right? The EV craze we're seeing all the car makers are all in, right?
Be careful. No, they're not. Look at the Japanese. They're not jumping in, and there's a reason for that. We can talk about that.
The American car companies and the oh yeah, there we go. Trev, you read my mind. Why electric cars will take over sooner than you think. Now, this was from 2021, and it's a couple of years ago. What is this from? Oh, this was a BBC article. Scroll down. So, we are in the middle of the biggest revolution in motoring since Henry Ford's first production, and it's likely to happen much quicker than you imagine. Now, this was from 3 or 4 years ago, and if we so they're predicting. So whoever this was at the time is saying this is going to happen, and it's going to happen because scroll down, Trev. What are the reasons? The revolution will be electric, right? I love this part. So there's a there's a comparison of the EV market is about where the internet was in the late 1990s or early 2000s. There was a big buzz, and I love that Yahoo Las Vegas. Welcome to Las Vegas. And then the S curve, and then so basically the case that they're making here is that these kinds of innovations start off with this kind of gradual, like there's some buzz and where's it going, and then all of a sudden, boom, they take over. And the internet took. Oh yeah, there we go. There's the S curve. Slow growth, exponential growth as prices fall, and then market saturation. So 3 or 4 years ago, they predicted that that we're going to see exponential growth in electric vehicles as the prices come down, just the same way we did with internet technology. How does that? Is that what's causing all the craze of everybody coming out?
So let's talk about the realities of electric vehicles. They're for wealthy people with garages. It's expensive to build an electric vehicle, expensive to buy one, and if you want any range, you can figure add another $30,000 or $50,000 on top of the cost of the electric vehicle. So only wealthy people can afford them. In order to be convenient, you need to wake up and be able to drive it. That means you need to charge it at night, which means you need to own a house that has a garage so you can build a charging station, right? That's the facts. You might can argue with me that all you want.
What do those in your garage charging stations cost?
You actually get tax credits for that, and there's some usefulness to it. Now let me talk about some of the good stuff about electric vehicles. Unbelievably efficient. So my car, between the time the engine generates power and by the time it hits the rear wheels, loses 20% of that power to friction. It also loses about 70% of that power to dumping heat in the atmosphere, right? Electric vehicle has no transmission. It has 100% of torque at 1 RPM. It is highly efficient. The inefficient part is the battery. So when I drive my car, I have fuel that is combusted, and the exhaust components, which by the way are fine for the environment, go out the exhaust pipe.
Whoa. The exhaust components are fine? We'll come back to that.
In modern cars, yeah. In an electric vehicle, your exhaust components are stored in the battery, right? They're not, so you have to have enough weight to be able to carry not only your fuel, but your exhaust. When you recharge that battery, it takes the exhaust and it turns it back into potential energy in the battery so you can recycle and run that discharge cycle again. Some people don't understand. So electric vehicles are awesome in their place. They will never take over internal combustion engines. Internal combustion engines are cheap, reliable, inexpensive. You can run them off almost anything. And once again, if you look at what's happening in the world, right now, most of the world's population lives in a rural agrarian society. So there's a family in China. They have 10 kids. The 10 kids are their workforce. They have a farm. They grow enough food to feed themselves. Hopefully, it's a little bit extra so they can make them money to recharge their phones so they can play games, right?
Right.
By 2050, that same family is going to be living in a city. And it's going to need transportation and carpet and duct tape and shoes and everything that makes modern lifestyle possible. Only internal combustion engines can provide that transportation at scale. I'll go on record right here. You will never see commercial success with pure battery electric airplanes. They can barely move themselves, much less have a bathroom and and be able to serve drinks and everything else on modern planes.
Yeah.
You'll never see a battery electric military vehicle unless they intentionally want it to be stealthy. Like you're not going to see the Marines getting a battery electric helicopter moving the battlefield. That'll never happen.
No.
Long haul trucking will never be battery electric. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense from a physics point of view. Short distance EVs are great if you can afford them. The battery's the culprit. The electric motor is great, so we need a different source of electricity, which I think is probably fuel cells in the future. We're nowhere near close to that right now.
Fuel cells.
Yeah. So you basically take a fuel cell, which is what NASA invented. You dump hydrogen in it. Out comes electricity and drinkable water. Your exhaust is drinkable water and electricity. Now, we're way off from getting there, right? But if you look at the automobile manufacturers...
Kind of like puts a whole new twist on sucking on a tailpipe.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you look at the automobile manufacturers right now, all of the Americans and the big Europeans are jumping on electrification because they can sell vehicles, right? It has nothing to do with what they think about the environment or what they think the future's going to bring. If you look at the Japanese, now, if you understand the Japanese auto market, it sucked. After World War II, we destroyed it, and then we helped them rebuild it. And a lot of modern manufacturing techniques we introduced to the Japanese, and they took it to heart, and it became part of their culture, and they build some of the best automobiles on the planet, right? They're not moving to electrification. You know why? And it's not like the CEO of Toyota talks to me personally, right? They think it's a fad, and they're not going to take the time and the money to retool and to try to capture rare earth elements and fight with GM and everybody else over that. They're going to keep on producing efficient internal combustion engines.
All right, so this gets to, all right. Because I have a theory or a prediction. I know really predictions are your business, but occasionally I like to make a prediction. But before I get to that, well, I guess there's two things. All right, let's do the prediction first, because then there's this other thing I want to get to. It kind of ties back to your anti-human thing. So. And you mentioned you have to pay extra money. There was actually an article about this. I think we have it here. Maybe I don't have it.
Yeah, I'm looking at this right now with an F-150. If I buy the baseline F-150, I'll get, I think, 270-mile range, and that's an average, right? If I want the longer extension, it's another $30,000 for me to take that 274 miles and bring it close to 400.
Yeah, so there was an article about this. I thought I had it, but they basically said it was like the hidden, wasn't that, but it was like the untold part about buying an electric vehicle is that you have to pay more for the range, and even which is kind of funny because if somebody told you you had to pay more for your car to have a bigger gas tank, you'd probably
laugh.
Right?
Yeah.
But you have to pay more, substantially more, and and even what you get in the way of more isn't that much more.
Right.
So you go from 270 miles to 320 miles or something like that, and then you have this problem of like it's fine if you're driving around town and you know where all the charging stations are and you're not that far from home, but it's really hard if you're trying to take a trip, a long trip.
And there's a social aspect of it that people don't talk about. So if you're trying to take a long trip, most modern electric vehicles will map out your route for you based on recharging stations, right? When you get there, the odds are you're not the only person waiting to recharge. So like when you go to the gym and you get on the treadmill, and there's a line of people waiting. In the gym, there's a sign that says, if there are people waiting, you only have 20 minutes. The recharging stations do the same thing. If you have a line of people waiting, you can't sit there and tank up. You're going to get 20 minutes, right? But by the way, you're paying premium kilowatt per hour for that. And so instead of tanking up, you're filling up 10 or 15%. Right. Which means you have to go to the next closest recharging station.
Right.
Which is going to totally change car culture in the U.S. And I think that one of the things you can see, because I think electric vehicles are here to stay, like I said, once again, for the wealthy that have garages, I think you're going to see convenience stores change to being more entertainment focused. So when you stop and spend an hour to recharge your vehicle instead of the 10 minutes it takes me to refuel my car, you want to do something other than drink a Slurpee and eat chips. So I think you can see it's going to spur a whole new business of short films, games, stuff that you can do while your car is recharging.
Right. It's
a sidetrack you, I'm sorry.
No, you didn't. I was thinking about two different things. Look up the inconvenient truth of electric vehicles. I think that's the article that I saw. So here's my my hypothesis, I guess, because everything what you just said, and I've also there it is. Yeah. Oh, it's in the Atlantic of all places. It was actually kind of funny that the Atlantic actually published this. But what they say here is, so they get into like the basic $45,000. Wait, we went too far. The basic $45,000 version of they can drive 247 miles. To go further, you got to pay some more, and you get 290 miles. I mean, and then if you go up to $52,000 for the car, you get 320 miles, which. So to me, like 247, 290, and 320 don't feel that much different, right? But I guess if you're trying to drive from if you're trying to drive from here to I don't know, to Denver for your ski trip, and you want to figure out and it's whatever that is, 1,200 miles or something like that. I guess having the extra 40 or 50 miles or whatever is a big deal. But I guess my hypothesis is. People, so everybody's rushing to buy the electric vehicles.
Actually, let me stop you there. No, they're not. Right? As somebody that did a whole bunch of car shopping right during and after the pandemic, go try to find an electric vehicle in a lot somewhere. Right? Every dealership will have one or two, and you come back a month later, it's still the same one or two.
So there's a lot of marketing hype, but what you're saying is people aren't.
People haven't bought into it yet.
Trav, have you started shopping for your EV yet?
I want to kill the earth.
He's got a 2003 Tahoe that gets you probably get a good 6 or 7 miles to the
gallon.
Three miles.
It doesn't break down.
He just straps a gasoline tank on the roof, and it just continues to drain into the tank as he drives.
Hey, can I be a little conspiratorial here for a second?
Yes, please.
So, if you have to pay more to go farther.
Yeah.
EV focused companies get better, or let's say more points from the ESG benefactors, right? So the ESG benefactors make the standard for what's acceptable, right? Or what's more beneficial. So then the car manufacturers will base how they price their miles based off.
They're in cahoots, is what you're saying.
So you have to, by way of the car manufacturer, you have to pay the government to go farther, right?
Did you?
That's deep. Oh, I do follow it. So there's another part of that, Trevor, you may not know. And I don't know about the other EVs. I just know about Tesla. When you buy a Tesla and you sign all the paperwork, stuff that nobody reads, one of the things in there is all the data you generate in that Tesla belongs to Tesla. And what you may have wondered is, why does Tesla only recharge from Tesla recharging stations instead of a universal recharging stations? Because the Tesla recharging stations have a data kinetic connection. And every time you plug in your Tesla, it downloads all of your data and sends it back to Tesla headquarters. Now, there's a bunch of good reasons for Tesla to do that as far as research and development. But in today's modern marketing world, there's also a bunch of ways that data can be used in ways to make you do stuff, behave a certain way, buy certain things. I think that's part of the strategy is actually, it's just another way to collect data on what we're doing. If you want to really get deep in conspiracy stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll throw something in on the pile there. Cause Trev, what you just said was, you talked about ESG and electric vehicles, but at this point in time, ESG requirements are not really being levied on individuals. It's just on
not
companies.
Yet.
Not yet.
And the reason not yet is because it's hard to track what an individual does.
Right.
Right. As far as emissions, right? We all breathe out right around 3 pounds of carbon dioxide a day.
Right.
We're getting to the point with big data analytics and cheap sensors and wireless connectivity that at some point it would be possible for individuals to be measured and taxed on their impact or their perceived impact to the environment.
Now, so Trev, what you said there was actually probably darker even than you realized. And
then they can control what sort of updates and how you can use your car through the charging station.
Yep, 100%. It's already happening in Tesla
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
The other thing that's going on, and it's going on in California right now, is all of a sudden California, who's bankrupt anyway, woke up and go, oh my God, we're requiring all vehicles to be electric by 2030.
Well, we can't keep the grid running.
Well, but all of our road funding, or not all of it, but the amount of road funding that we generate that the federal government matches comes from the excise tax on hydrocarbon fuels, on diesel and gasoline.
Right.
So we're not going to have that money on electric vehicles. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to charge electric vehicle owners per mile a tax. That's getting very big brotherish.
Yeah. Okay, so now I want to throw in something else because my hypothesis is there were some other things here that I saw about in the news lately about people talking about it being a logistical nightmare for the charging if you're trying to drive on a long trip.
Let's talk a little bit about more than just electric vehicles. So John Deere, I'm not picking on John Deere because I'm sure other people have done this as well, also had a big push in electrification of farm vehicles. And they did a big pilot study in 2021, actually in Iowa, which is kind of like the mecca center of renewable fuels, corn, all that stuff, very pro ESG farming, right? And the first thing the farmer said is, this will not work. During harvest season, these tractors have to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If I miss an hour and we get rain, I lose a harvest. I don't have time to recharge farm equipment.
Right.
Now,
it's not like I do have a battery powered lawnmower, and I can just pull the battery out and put a new one.
Right.
Yeah, it's
you can't hot swap a John Deere. Right?
Yeah.
And so John Deere spent all that research and development money and time and actually built functioning prototypes, and the moment they put it in the field, they realized it was worthless, right? You can't run a farm that way. How many more types of research and development projects that we could go through? Our buddies at United Airlines, they put a lot of money down just recently on a bunch of electric battery planes, and like I said, the physics will not support that ever being a viable commuter plane.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah, and that's a really good point. So, and all of this actually coming back to this notion of ensuring that we can, if I'm the guardian of the American dream, all of these things could, I guess the point is that we're screwing around with stuff, and we're
going backwards.
Yeah.
We're literally going backwards in a lot of ways. You look at a lot of the civil unrest that happens in this country since the pandemic, that's going backwards. I'm not saying we had civil relationships perfect, that it was utopia, but we have gone a long way since the 1940s and 50s, right? And we went backwards. We're doing the same thing with our energy security. Up until recently, this was the most energy secure nation on the planet. Not only is it the most energy secure nation on the planet, but the entire energy industry in the world uses the American dollar to do business because of the security and the stability that we provided. And we're backing away from that. And it scares me, Michael.
Yeah.
It's a strategic petroleum reserve. That is there in case we have a major conflict in the world so we can fuel our war machine and our abilities to produce products. We won World War II because we could outproduce everybody, right? We have 19 days of supply left in our strategic petroleum reserve as of today. We've drawn it down that low.
Yeah.
So if we have another world war, we have 19 days and the country runs out of fuel.
Okay, well, at least it'll be over quick.
Yeah.
Is the thing.
But to your point, if your job was to provide for energy security and prosperity for this country, the very first thing you'd want to do is disconnect energy from politics. And you'd want to bring in engineers and scientists and business professionals and say, tell me what our energy mix should look like and how should we progress.
And we'll just do it and stop with all the, there's another thing too here, which I had this notion. By the way, the hypothesis, the prediction, which I haven't gotten to yet, is that I think there's a possibility that people, that for the people who are enthusiastic, and maybe it's not as many as what I thought, but for the people who are all excited about buying electric vehicles, once they really have to deal with them on a regular basis for a year or two, could we see people saying, forget that, I'm going back to the old car again?
So the only people that are repeat electric vehicle buyers, and I know I'm off a percentage, but in the grand scheme of things, are the people that have internal combustion engine vehicle in the family. The people that have only an electric car as their only source of transportation are never repeat buyers. And I know there's a percentage I'm wrong, but in the grand scheme of things, yeah.
So all right. So now here's my throw into the conspiracy theory, which is so Chris Bentley was on the show a while back. You know Chris, yeah. And actually, it was when he was here with Hang Pham, who wrote this children's book we have down here, and we were talking about human rights, like what's a human right, and what's not a human right, and we were talking about that in light of immigration. And one of the things that Chris said, which he said it in such a way that I never really heard anybody say it like this, but what he said was, freedom of movement is a human right. And his position as a dyed-in-the-wool libertarian is that, people should be allowed to do whatever they're going to do, but then they shouldn't get free stuff when they do it. But so that's a different topic. But in the context of that, he said freedom of movement is a human right. And if you think about that, you think, okay, yeah, like the freedom of people to go places and do things is a big part of how like a society grows and innovates and explores and discovers and all of these things, right? If you keep humans from being able to move and go places, then you really you take a lot out of their ability to do things, and it actually become much easier to control. So if you think about the push toward driving electric vehicles, which have this stupid range problem, to where you get frustrated and you just say, well, I'll just stay home. I'm tired of trying to figure this out. I'll just stay home. And then over here we got this other project, which we haven't talked about yet, though, the 5-minute cities or the 15-minute cities or whatever the hell it is, right? We're trying to build these cities for people so that you don't really have to. Everything you want to do is within 5 minutes away, and then you're thinking about, well, we need to change our lifestyle. So if we're going to use these new sources of energy, change our lifestyle to use a lot less power so that we don't destroy the planet. This is all starting to sound like some sort of crazy, like world economic, for like Klaus Schwab, some sort of crazy way of controlling humanity that like coming at it from all different angles.
Yeah. So when you say that, the first thing I think of is we're back to the horse and buggy days. The range
Right.
Everything being close.
Right.
Inability to move long distance for pennies on the dollar. In a lot of ways, yeah, I see that. The other thing is, and I'm super patriotic. I did 4 years Marine Corps. I love my country. Most Americans have never left the U.S., and they don't realize how good and prosperous we have it here.
Yeah.
To your point, most of the world, by law, can't move outside whatever village or town or county or whatever they live in without the right paperwork. That still goes on. That's not just in movies, right?
Right.
And then even if they can, they don't have the whereabouts. They don't have the cheap transportation that we take for granted here to move wherever they wanted to. One of the cool things about being an American is I want to pack up and move to New Hampshire. I can do it without having to ask anybody, without having to get any paperwork done by the police.
And you just go.
Throw stuff in a U-Haul. I don't even have to own the vehicle, and I can make it happen. Most of the world's not like that.
Yeah. So if we're pushing people toward, okay, we have to save the planet, which means we need to use a lot less power, and yeah, you can use your electric vehicles, but they don't go very far. And by the way, hybrids are like, we're not happy with hybrids. Those are no
Funny
good.
thing is, nobody's happy with hybrids. Yeah. I'm the only person that likes hybrids. The only reason I like them is I can pass them no matter what they want to do or not.
Yeah, right. So, and we're going to make these cities, we need to change. And you mentioned this earlier, like, well, you're going to have to move away from everybody driving themselves around to more public transportation. Well, of course, there's nothing wrong with public transportation, but there's something wrong with being forced to only use public transportation. Right. If I just want to go, like if tomorrow morning I want to drive to Oklahoma City, right? Then that's what
something everybody should do at least once.
Drive to Oklahoma City. Yeah. I kind of like Oklahoma City. So, so all of this. So you can see, and it comes back to this thing where, you and I said at the beginning. Not quite at the beginning, but like, why is everybody just bought? How come we skipped over like the debate and the critical thinking and the analysis, and we've just gone to we have to do everything we can, or else we're going to have a catastrophe? It does start to feel like some sort of like huge orchestrated way of resetting, to use the new buzzword.
So I'm not a conspiracy theorist, although after going through 2020. It's hard not to be around certain things, right? Because certain things just seems impossible to be a coincidence. I will say this much, though. If you look back at history, every major civilization, whether they were run by politicians or priests or whatever, had some way, some belief system that they instilled upon their people that helped them maintain control. Now, part of that is good, right? You want law and order. You don't want just chaos and anarchy. So you have to have some system. But think of the Mayans. The entire civilization believed, 100% believed, that if they didn't cut the living heart out of an enemy warrior each year on the right pyramid, the sun wouldn't rise. Is that any different than if we don't quit using hydrocarbons, we're going to burn this world up?
It's a little bit, it's kind of a little... Can we get others to the 15-minute city? Trev, can we get a picture of the Mayan heart cutting?
Let's not show that to people. But I mean, Michael, in our lifetime, remember, what was it? Stop, drop, and roll. But remember all the nuclear drills we actually did in elementary school?
Sure, yeah.
Remember the people that were wealthy had bomb shelters, right?
Oh yeah. So, but this is the thing. So without getting into, so I'm not a
duck and cover. That's what it was.
Duck and cover. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, although I do somewhere in my adult life, it's been a long time now, I came to the conclusion that whatever we think is happening is probably not what's really happening most of the time. The other
thing I've realized, because I volunteered for a political campaign a few years ago, because I wanted to be the guy that wasn't talking politics but actually did it, is at least in the state of Texas, our politicians are not the sharpest tool in the toolbox. They're the people that can't cut it in business. And so, unfortunately, at least right now, 2023 in the U.S., the people that are leading this country, our politicians, are not the scientists and the businessmen and the thinkers. Yeah. They're not.
They're people.
Yeah.
So, but if you take away, but coming back to, So Chris Bentley's point about freedom of movement is a human right, and we see how the ability to go, even going back to the early days of this country, and people leaving the eastern seaboard and going west and doing new things and adventure and the spirit of individual achievement. If you take away if you gradually cut away at people's ability to just get up and go somewhere, what does that do to that? I got to believe that has a bad effect on our, and if we let it happen to ourselves, right? We're letting it be done to us.
There's another side of that, though, and I see this with my son. So my son is 17 years old. He's getting ready to graduate high school. He has a group of friends from around the world that he's known since he was 7 years old online. We didn't have that ability, right?
True.
Right? And so he's been exposed to different cultures, different languages, different thought processes from his group of friends that he's met basically playing video games. That opens up a whole different world to that generation and the way they think about stuff, the way they do stuff. That Generation Z, I think, is the savior of this country.
Yeah.
You can't fool them.
Right.
They don't believe anything on social media.
Yeah.
They fact check everything. And instead of saving the planet, they want to make money first, then save the planet. And that sounds selfish, but that little bit of selfishness, that wanting to better yourself, wanting to make money, wanting to not go into $300,000 worth of debt to get a degree in French, is really what this world needs more of. And I think they're the saviors of
yeah, you
the
might
country.
be right about that. You might be right. So, and that's true. And you're right. And society evolves in different ways. But in terms of, I think there's fundamental pillars of what makes our system. And you said a few minutes ago, you said, well, people, because Americans don't travel that much, and that's actually come up quite a bit on this show, they don't really always appreciate what we have. But also, I feel like sometimes we're not seeing when some of the critical kind of underlying components of what makes what we have is the way it is, those things kind of get chiseled away and infringed on. Of course, you said this before. I think it was before we turned on the microphones, but we're getting dumber, right? So,
yeah.
So maybe that's really the problem, is that we're just getting dumber.
So don't just take that at face value. What Michael and I were talking about is I watched a documentary last night based upon scientific research that our cognitive ability and our intelligent quota here in Europe is starting to decline, that we've reached that bell curve and start to go down. Let's give that some time to figure it out. But that actually scares me, even to the point when you think about, we don't go through natural selection anymore. Right? So
right.
I was born premature. If I was born during the caveman days, I wouldn't have survived.
Right.
I'm also nearsighted, right? Which means I could not have hunted.
Right.
So it took civilization, and the definition of civilization is civilization protects its weaker members. It would take a civilization to help feed me because I couldn't hunt, but maybe there's something else I could have done to donate to civilization, right? Maybe I was good at making knives or something, whatever, right? So because we don't go through natural selection anymore, are we allowing the genetic components to multiply that keeps us from being able to think critically, to be able to stand up? I mean, I think about this all the time. And Trevor, I'm not picking on you at all. I actually love your generation, but the generation right before yours,
he's like right in between.
Yeah.
He's like right in between the millennials and the Gen Z.
18-year-olds at that generation were on the beaches of Iwo Jima fighting for this country's freedom.
Yeah.
And now we have those same kids that need puppies in high school because President Trump won, right? And they need a safe space.
Yeah.
How far have we gone, as a country?
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there's parallels to other societies, right? Other civilizations where when you reach a point of becoming so comfortable.
Yep. It's called the peace paradox.
Right.
As the civilization gets more and more successful, the people that run it are so far away from the front lines, they start believing this. I see this here in the U.S. I've talked to educated people that believe we don't need a military. There's no reason. Nobody wants to hurt us. Bullshit.
Bullshit.
There's people want to kill you and rape your girlfriend because you don't think the same way they think. Right? That's the legitimate. That's real.
Yeah.
Right? There's countries out there that are so jealous of our natural resources and our economic success, they want to take us over. And so the peace paradox says, and this happened to the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians and the Romans and the Greeks, is that as the civilization grows and the people at the front line get so far away, the people at the front line are the ones that see the real world, and you have the people in the middle that have the leisure time to develop art and music and philosophy, and eventually the people in the middle don't think there's evil in the world anymore,
right?
And they disband the front lines, and the civilization collapses.
And they find stupid shit to worry about,
yeah,
and problems, right? To your point, like, yeah, because you're not worried about survival anymore. You're not worried about putting food on the table and feeding your family. So, not that there aren't people in this country who are worried about that. But the point is, so we find kind of dumb things to
inconsequential things.
Yeah,
there's real problems in this world that we can solve. A lot of the problems that we talk about, number one, half of them aren't real. The other half, they make no difference. And then the last little bit, we can't solve them anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, that's well, we're bumping up on an hour, so
wow,
probably
that was quick.
Yeah, we probably, well, it always is quick. So
thanks for inviting me on. This is fun.
Yeah, no, it is good.
I don't usually get to speak my mind because on our podcast, they're sponsored, and our sponsors have certain rules and regulations, and we want to be respectful to our sponsors, and we are. But since you don't have a sponsor yet,
this is a volunteer squad. Yeah, right? This is a volunteer squad, so we get to say whatever we want. But I think, but those are good. It's good. So all of your insights are really good, because I hear, and of course we've been working together for 3 years, whatever it's been, and so I kind of have the inside track on a lot of the things that we talked about, but and I look and I hear and I see what people are doing, and you go, this really doesn't make sense, and it, a couple of years ago my attitude was, yeah, okay, whatever. These people are, people are chasing things. It makes them feel good, whatever. But lately it's been a little bit more like, you need to be careful, because you could break stuff. And
it's already happened. And caused impacts to other people's lives, negative impacts to other people's lives.
Yeah.
And there has to be some accountability to that. And once again, you got to kind of go back to like science and common sense and understand how the world works.
Well, we need to do a whole other episode on the science, because another one of my pet peeves is we change what words mean, and words like violence and science and things like that. So we don't, or we change what words mean, or we change the rules around those words. But the
scientists, like when you and I were young, the guy in a white coat, we believed, because he did everything he or she could to speak the truth, right? There's a professional ethics about being a scientist. Now scientists are politicized. There's no place in this world for that at all.
So we just need to get the politicians out of everything, and then
it'll be a better place.
Things will get better. All right, that's gonna. Any other nuggets of or something that's like burning that you got to say before we wrap up? Are we good?
So the whole plastics things in the ocean, the whole reason I have to have a freaking paper straw when I go to Starbucks is ridiculous. All that plastic in the ocean comes from Africa and China, not the U.S. and Europe. So can we please get regular straws back at Starbucks?
All right, that's it. We got to get regular straws back. I noticed. So Whataburger, good traditional Texas company now that's owned by a Chicago bank. They still got the plastic.
They still got the plastic straws. I'm big fan of Whataburger. Actually, I know some people there. I may reach out there, and Whataburger, you ought to think about sponsoring the show.
Yeah, we did. Well, Trevor and I are big. We actually like the burgers. I mean, Whataburger's a good.
So burger. I love Whataburger burgers. I think they're the best fast food burger out there. I'm not saying that because I'm from Texas.
They're almost not even like a fast food burger. They're almost like
homemade.
Burger. Yeah, they're really good. All right, that's good. Thanks, Mark, for coming. Yeah,
thanks for having me, Michael.
We're done.
Thanks, Trevor.